I'm not proud of what I was thinking the night I found out my $50,000 bonus had disappeared. I was alone in the office kitchen, holding a paper cup under a coffee machine that coughed like a smoker, staring at the congratulations email I had been replaying in my head for weeks. Pending final approval, it said back in March. Today, after 12 months of missed birthdays, cold dinners, and 2 a.m. bug fixes, pending final approval turned into, unfortunately, due to budget constraints, annual discretionary awards are paused. I read the sentence 3 times while the drip went silent. Then I pulled up Instagram and saw my boss in a cabana in Tulum with a silver bucket of champagne toasting the ocean. The caption, "Work hard, play harder. You get what you negotiate." I still don't know why my hands didn't shake. They just went numb, like when you leave them under hot water too long and nerves give up. Let me back up and tell you who I am, because I want you to believe me. My name's Evan. I'm the guy they call when a project is on fire and the client is already tweeting. I build knots and I untie them. I'm boring in all the ways that keep companies alive. I make lists. I write documentation. I follow up when everyone else mentally checks out. Last April, our team took on 3 enterprise rollouts at once because sales promised the moon before asking if we even had rockets. 2 product managers quit, 1 engineer went on stress leave, and I said, "I'll cover." Not because I'm a hero, because I grew up in a house where the electric bills sometimes won, and when I hear bonus, I translate it into months of mortgage and a brake job my car desperately needs. I can tell you exactly when the $50,000 number appeared. It was a Tuesday, late, the kind of late where the office skyline is just you and the cleaning crew. My boss, let's call him Conrad, leaned on my cubicle and said, "We land the Hartwell renewal and the Donnelly pilot by Q2, and I'll fight for a hero number. Think 50. People like Conrad never say numbers out loud unless they're sure. He wore certainty like his watch, heavy, shiny, expensive enough to catch the fluorescent light and make you forget he once took credit for a report I wrote. I went home that night and told my wife, Grace, we might finally fix the roof before the rainy season. She hugged me like a life vest. Fast forward through an ugly year. Through the quarter where I slept on the office couch twice. Through customer success calls where I swallowed my pride, while a client yelled about an outage that wasn't our fault, but somehow always became my problem. Through the time I wrote a weekend rollback plan while my daughter practiced her piano piece in the next room, and I pretended the keys weren't a metronome, counting down my absence. Through 10 different versions of a deck Conrad presented to the board, the one that got a standing ovation because the charts curved upward like a sunrise. I know because I built those charts. The teal lines were mine. I kept my receipts, not out of paranoia, out of habit. Calendar invites, Jira tickets, OPS chat threads, redlined contracts with timestamps, showing who actually pushed the thing over the finish line. And then in March, an email from HR. Manager nomination received for Discretionary Excellence Award. The nomination form was attached. I still have the PDF. In the justification section, someone, Conrad, had typed my name 4 times. I read it to Grace out loud, and we let ourselves do math on a napkin. Pay off the remaining hospital bill from when our son broke his arm. Replace the dying tires. Book an actual vacation, one where I wouldn't bring a hotspot to the beach like an idiot. 2 weeks later, Conrad stopped by my desk with a grin that looked like victory. "Good news, kid. Director loved the numbers. Sit tight for the wire." He clapped me on the shoulder like a coach. I didn't whoop. I nodded. I've learned not to celebrate until the money is boring in my bank account. The day the funds were supposed to hit, I wore the shirt Grace says makes me look like I sleep more than I do. I took the early train so I could watch the ACH deposit clear before the morning stand-up. 9:01 a.m. Nothing. 9:15. Nothing. At 9:28, my calendar pinged with a quick sync from Conrad. Conference room B, the one with the plant that keeps dying and resurrecting like nobody told it to stop trying. He was already there, jacket off, tie loose in that fake casual way. "Evan, close the door." I did. He steepled his fingers like he'd seen in a TED Talk. "Tough one. Finance froze discretionary payouts. Macro headwinds." He used words like sandbags. Heavy, vague, impossible to argue with without looking naive. "It's not a reflection on you. You're valued. We'll make it up on the back end." I stared at the table because if I looked at his face, I might find myself asking whether the picture he posted last night from Habitas Tulum was macro headwinds too. There was a line of salt dried on his cuff, a tiny white shoreline where the ocean had kissed his linen shirt. I don't know why that detail stuck. Maybe because the ocean, I know, lives in a cracked ceiling above our bed that darkens with every storm. "I appreciate the update," I said, because I was raised to say please and thank you even when my ribs are cracking. "When did finance decide this?" He checked his watch, as if time itself might defend him. "Last week, things shifted." "And the award I was nominated for?" He smiled like we were sharing a secret. "Still a nominee. Look, Evan, you're a long game guy. You get it. Keep doing what you're doing. We'll take care of you." I walked out carrying a paper cup I didn't remember picking up. I set it on my desk, logged in, and did what you do when you are the reliable one. I kept working. At noon, I ate a granola bar in 3 bites. At 4 p.m., my Slack pinged with a group photo, Conrad shoulder to shoulder with a VP, both doing that fake, candid laugh. The backdrop wasn't our office. It was a pool framed by palm trees. The subtitle, Q2 kickoff in the sun, recharge before the sprint. I opened Instagram, and there it was again, his story, tagged in Spanish, with a geolocation that matched the resort from the recruitment brochure he'd bragged about. Bet $200 a night, private plunge pools, slow living for fast minds. When I got home, Grace was crouched under the sink with a bucket because the pipe we'd been praying over decided to give up. I knelt beside her, and we both laughed the kind of tired laugh that sounds like crying in a different language. I told her about finance, about macro headwinds, about a man with salt on his shirt telling me to wait. She wiped a line of grit off her cheek with the back of her wrist. "I don't care how long it takes," she said, and it wasn't about the money. "I just want you to sleep. I want you to not have to be the net under everyone else." After the kids were in bed, I tried to be the kind of husband who doesn't bring spreadsheets to the kitchen table. I failed. I opened my laptop and pulled up the nomination PDF, the forecast slides, the email from HR with the subject line, "Congratulations in advance," a phrase I once thought was cute and now sounded like a curse. I stared at the numbers I had improved for people who call me rock star in public and resource in private. Then I clicked open our company travel portal out of habit, because I handle bookings for last-minute client rescues. There at the top of the dashboard, under executive itineraries, was a familiar last name with a familiar destination and a familiar price tag. Someone had used the corporate card to upgrade to a villa. 2 nights ago, the same 2 days I had spent refreshing my bank app like a gambler. I closed the laptop and just sat there, palms flat on wood, breathing. I'm not dramatic, I don't slam things, but something in me went quiet in a way that felt new. Not rage, not even hurt, just a clean, cold line where the benefit of the doubt used to live. I told myself a story I could live with for 12 hours. Maybe Conrad fronted it himself. Maybe the company comped it for retention. Maybe that pool was a stock photo, and I was being petty. And then I opened my email one more time and saw a forwarded message I wasn't meant to see, because someone in finance always forgets to remove the prior chain. The subject line was my name plus bonus reallocation. The thread was short. It didn't use words like macro or headwinds. It used a code I'd seen once before during budget reviews. MBO, MGR Travel Recognition. My initials weren't on the line item anymore. I closed the laptop again. This time there wasn't even a sound, just the click of a hinge and the pitch of the room, shifting, like a train changing tracks so smoothly You almost miss it. Grace watched me from the hallway, backlit by our flickering kitchen light. Is it bad? It's clear, I said, and it felt like the truest thing I had said all year. I washed 2 plates we didn't use and left them to dry. I tucked our daughter in and promised I'd be in the audience for her recital, even if fire fell from the sky. Then I sat at the dining table with a legal pad and wrote a list with 2 columns: what I can prove and what I can't. I didn't know what the next move was, only that there would be one, and that for once it wouldn't be for someone else's convenience. I wasn't going to raise my voice. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to be careful, patient, and absolutely, painfully thorough. Because the thing about people like me, the boring ones, the list makers, is that when we finally decide to move, we bring the receipts. When people ask what I might actually do for a living, I usually just say, I work in tech. It's easier than trying to explain how many spinning plates I kept in the air this past year. But if I'm being honest, I was more than just a plate spinner. I was the guy standing on a ladder, holding the whole damn shelf while everyone else took lunch. And when I say I earned that bonus, I don't mean showed up and did my job. I mean I was the difference between a company announcing wins at quarterly meetings or quietly drafting layoff plans. I wish I were exaggerating. The truth is, the year started with a disaster. The Hartwell account, our largest renewal, was already halfway out the door. They'd been fed up with bugs, delays, and missed SLAs. Conrad asked me to massage the relationship. Translation: answer midnight calls, calm down executives who were ready to walk, and somehow fix issues that were way above my pay grade. I spent 3 weekends straight buried in code with engineers who had already mentally quit, patching things together with duct tape and caffeine. When Hartwell finally agreed to sign the renewal, Conrad strutted into the Monday meeting like a conquering general. He didn't mention my name once, not a single thank you. But I didn't care, because in the back of my mind, I could still hear him saying, "Think 50." It wasn't just Hartwell. Donnelly, our other major pilot, was a train wreck in slow motion. Their CTO was breathing down our necks because we'd promised integrations that were nowhere near ready. Guess who spent nights writing temporary solutions and documentation so polished it looked like a real product roadmap? Guess who got on planes at dawn to deliver on-site training sessions that Conrad was too busy to attend? I remember one morning in Dallas, I'd landed at 6 a.m., slept maybe 2 hours in the past 36, and I was shaking so badly from exhaustion I dropped my coffee in the client lobby. You know what kept me going? That number. 50,000. It wasn't just money. It was validation. Proof that killing myself for this company actually meant something. Meanwhile, Conrad played the role of visionary. He'd sweep into meetings with cufflinks gleaming, drop a few buzzwords, and leave me to explain the details. I'd stand there, hoarse from talking, watching him collect nods from executives who thought he was the brains behind every slide. The same slides I'd built at 2 a.m. while he was sending out work hard, play harder tweets. There were nights I didn't even make it home. I'd crash on the office couch, shoes off, jacket over my face to block the fluorescent glare. Janitors would vacuum around me. My phone alarm would go off at 6 a.m., and I'd splash water on my face in the bathroom sink before walking into a meeting like nothing happened. Grace would text me pictures of the kids eating dinner without me, sometimes with little drawings they made on napkins. "We miss you, Daddy." I'd stare at those texts between calls and remind myself, this bonus is for them. This pain will be worth it. The hardest part wasn't the exhaustion, it was the invisibility. Every time a deal closed, Conrad sent out company-wide emails congratulating our team. But team always meant him first. Every time a project went well, he was the one presenting at board meetings, collecting handshakes and smiles. Me? I was a support. I started to feel like a ghost haunting my own career. Still, I clung to the hope of that payout. It wasn't greed, it was necessity. Grace and I had sat at the kitchen table, calculators out, making plans, pay off the hospital bill, finally patch the roof before mold set in. Maybe, just maybe, a real family vacation where I wasn't chained to my laptop. For once, we let ourselves dream. I pushed through illnesses, skipped doctor appointments, ignored the pounding in my chest that came from too much caffeine and too little sleep. After the bonus, I told myself, you can rest. That became my mantra. After the bonus, after the bonus, and then came the moment that broke me. End of Q2, right after we'd pulled off a miracle with Donnelly. Conrad called me into his office. "You're killing it, Evan," he said, grinning like we were best friends. "Director's impressed. Finance is on board. Sit tight." He even fist bumped me. I walked out lightheaded, like maybe all those sleepless nights were finally going to pay off, except they didn't. Because weeks later, when the payout should have landed, all I got was a shrug and a speech about macro headwinds. I smiled through the meeting, nodded at the excuses, but inside, something collapsed. And when I opened Instagram and saw Conrad in a luxury villa, sipping champagne with a caption about rewarding yourself, the collapse turned into something sharper, a quiet, steady kind of rage, not the kind that makes you throw things, the kind that makes you start collecting receipts. The day it all came crashing down wasn't some dramatic showdown. It was a Tuesday morning, bland as printer paper. Conrad called me into conference room B, the one with the sad, half-dead ficus in the corner, and gave me a look that was supposed to be sympathy but landed like mockery. "Finance froze discretionary payouts," he said, steepling his fingers like he was on a TED stage. "Macro headwinds, Evan. You know how it is. Not a reflection on your work. You're valued, you're critical. We'll make it up on the back end." I sat there, nodding like a good soldier while my throat closed up. $50,000. Gone. Months of work, hundreds of hours away from my family, the hospital bills, the roof repairs. All of it dissolved into a corporate buzzword. I forced out, "When was this decision made?" He glanced at his watch, not because he cared about the time, but because it made him look busy. "Last week, things shifted." That's when I noticed the faint white salt stain on the cuff of his linen shirt. The same shirt I'd seen in his Instagram story the night before, captioned, "Recharge before the sprint." A beach view in the background. A bucket of champagne at his side. I didn't say a word. I just stared at that shirt, that tiny crust of ocean salt, and felt something inside me go cold. Back at my desk, I did what I always do. I worked, sent emails, resolved JIRA tickets, patched things nobody else wanted to touch. But every time I tried to focus, my mind pulled me back to Conrad's Instagram feed. Stories of cocktails at infinity pools, dinners with bottle service, sunburned selfies with hashtags like Chajung, Grind Set, and Recharge. Grace noticed it in me that night. She was washing dishes, hands deep in suds, when she asked, "So, did it come through?" I told her the lie Conrad fed me. Finance froze bonuses. She just stared at me for a long moment, the kind that feels like X-ray vision. "But he's on vacation," she said quietly. "In Mexico, right? That place costs more a night than we spend on groceries in a month." I shrugged, pretending I didn't know. But she was right, and the humiliation burned deeper than the loss itself. Not only had he stolen my work, he'd stolen the reward and rubbed my face in it with filtered photos and captions about hard work paying off. The next day, word started spreading in the office. Not official, of course, just whispers. People saw his posts, put two and two together. Someone joked by the coffee machine, "Guess bonuses turned into margaritas this year." Laughter followed, sharp and cruel. I pretended I didn't hear, but inside I felt stripped bare. The money was gone, but worse, my dignity was gone too. He'd humiliated me without even knowing it. He'd made me the punchline of a joke I never signed up for. That Friday, my daughter had her recital. I sat in the school auditorium, tie still loose from work, trying to be present. She played beautifully, her little hands steady on the keys, and yet all I could think about was the photo Conrad had posted hours earlier. Him on a yacht. Sunglasses reflecting the ocean captioned, "Earned it." I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk into that office on Monday and tell everyone exactly what he'd done. Hold up the receipts, tear down the curtain. But that's not me. I don't explode. I calculate. So I started watching more carefully. Emails, expense reports, travel bookings. I noticed patterns. Noticed how business development trips always coincided with luxury resorts. How recognition budget always lined up with his personal getaways. I saved copies, screenshotted posts, collected every breadcrumb, and every time I added another file to the folder on my desktop, labeled receipts, I felt the humiliation harden into something stronger. Resolve. Because humiliation can crush you, or it can sharpen you. And Conrad, without even realizing it, had just handed me the knife. I don't think people realize how money like that, money you were promised, money you worked for, seeps into every corner of your life. It's not just numbers on a screen. It's groceries without hesitation. It's fixing the leak in your roof before the mold spreads. It's saying yes to your kid when they ask if you can afford piano lessons. It's breathing. When Conrad stole my bonus, he didn't just take $50,000. He took my ability to breathe. The week after his macro headwinds speech, the pressure started suffocating me. Grace and I sat at the kitchen table with a pile of bills between us. The hospital balance for our son's broken arm, the credit card we'd leaned on during the rough months, the estimate from the contractor to patch the roof before winter storms rolled in. Grace tried to sound calm. "We can juggle for a while. Maybe call my mom, see if—" "No," I cut her off, sharper than I meant. "We'll figure it out." She looked at me like she wanted to believe me, but her silence said what we were both thinking. We shouldn't have to figure it out. I'd earned that money. Fair and square. The stress bled into everything. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. drenched in sweat, scrolling through Conrad's posts in the dark like some kind of masochist. Him in another tailored suit, holding another glass of champagne, another caption about living your best life. Meanwhile, Grace was clipping coupons and I was skipping meals at work to stretch our budget. One night I came home late, exhausted, and found my daughter asleep at the table, her math homework still open. She had written, "Ask Dad" on the top of the page. I stood there staring, realizing how many times I hadn't been there to answer, how many nights I traded her questions for Conrad's emergencies. My chest hurt worse than any lack of sleep ever had. Even the kids started picking up on it. My son asked if we were in trouble. He's 8. He shouldn't even know what that means. I told him no, everything was fine. But his eyes searched my face, like he could see through the lie. At work, it was worse. Conrad strutted back from vacation like nothing had happened, tanned and smiling, shaking hands with directors like a man untouchable. He even dropped by my desk, clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hang in there, champ. Things will turn around." I forced a smile, but inside I was screaming. Things had already turned around, for him, with my money. And then came the final insult. A team meeting, all-hands style, where Conrad motivated us with slides about grit, perseverance, and weathering storms together. He actually used the phrase, "We're all in this boat." I sat there staring at him, knowing his boat had a private chef and an infinity pool, while mine was sinking with my family inside it. The humiliation was unbearable. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was stripped raw, reduced to a man who nodded and clapped, while the thief who robbed him bragged about leadership. That night, when I got home, Grace finally said what I'd been afraid to admit out loud. "You can't keep letting him do this to you." I just sat there, head in my hands. "What do you want me to do? He holds all the cards." "No," she said quietly. "He holds your silence, that's all. Take that away, and he's not as powerful as he thinks." Her words hit me like a hammer, because she was right. For years I'd been the quiet one, the fixer, the guy who cleaned up the mess, swallowed the insult, carried the weight. But what if silence was the very thing keeping him untouchable? I went upstairs, opened my laptop, and looked at the folder I'd been building. Receipts, emails, expense reports, screenshots of his vacation posts, timestamped the same days. Finance froze discretionary payouts. The nomination forms with my name on them. It was all there. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than rage or despair. I felt clarity. Conrad thought he had buried me. What he didn't realize was that I had been digging too. Not my grave, but his. I didn't start with anger. I started with a spreadsheet. If Conrad was going to hide behind phrases like macro headwinds, I was going to bury him in facts. I opened a blank workbook and named it, stupidly, Boat. A joke to myself, 8 tabs. The first was a timeline. Every promise, every milestone, every time he said sit tight. The second was payroll and awards policy excerpts. The third was travel and expenses. Fourth was public posts. Fifth, internal approvals. Sixth, deliverables that tied my work to revenue. Seventh, witnesses. Eighth, risk, what not to do. I wasn't going to hack anything or snoop where I didn't belong. Everything I collected, I had access to by doing my job. Our travel portal listed executive itineraries for coordination. Expense reports were visible to project leads attached to those cost centers. Our Slack had open channels. Our HR policy library was public internally. I exported PDFs the way I always had, for status decks, for audits, saved them to my home drive, and printed hard copies I stored in a manila folder under my desk. Nothing shady, no stolen passwords, just careful, meticulous homework. The timeline came together first. I cross-referenced calendar invites with emails, Slack pings, and signed SOWs. April 6th, Conrad, land Hartwell, Puss Donnelly by Q2. I'll fight for a hero number, 50K. May 19th, HR, manager nomination received for Discretionary Excellence Award. Attachment, form with my name, justification paragraph citing my projects. June 30th, Conrad, director loved the numbers, sit tight for the wire. July 14th, finance note forwarded in thread, MBO, MGR travel recognition. July 17th, HR, due to budget constraints, annual discretionary awards are paused. The same day, his Instagram story from a villa with a caption about recharging. I pulled the metadata where I could. Post timestamps, boarding passes, hotel invoice dates from the expense exports. The neat, infuriating overlay of his pause with his pool. Travel and expenses was uglier than I expected. I wasn't looking for fraud. I'm not an auditor. But patterns don't need a badge to exist. Line items coded to 6420 recognition and 6351 business development sat beside identical dates for Habitus Tulum, villa upgrade, and private boat charter. The manager code matched Conrad's. I pasted each entry into my sheet and linked the receipts. Over on the Public Posts tab, I pasted his captions with URL and timestamp. No commentary, no adjectives, just the coordinates of a story he was writing for me. Policy excerpts were my guardrails. I combed through the awards and recognition PDF until I found the clause I vaguely remembered. Discretionary Excellence Awards are funded from Cost Center 6420 and may not be reallocated without written notice from finance and approval by the Director of People Operations. I highlighted it and added the file path, another section. Travel and recognition budgets shall not be mixed for personal travel or non-business purposes. But I didn't need to argue. I just needed to place those sentences next to those invoices. For deliverables, I pulled win-loss memos, the renewal decks, the change orders that increased Hartwell revenue after I re-architected their rollout. I wasn't going to say, I deserve 50K. I was going to say, this is what the award was nominated for, and here are the signed documents showing the value created. I uploaded anonymized customer feedback pulled from our CSAT tool, where my name appeared in the comment, then screenshotted the dashboard showing retention and expansion. Numbers don't get embarrassed. Witnesses was delicate. I wasn't going to drag anyone into a fight they didn't choose. But if I said I was told X on Y date, there had to be another pair of ears in the room. I listed first names and roles only. Miguel, Ops, present for 6:30 sit-tight convo. Priya, Finance, forwarded reallocation thread in error, 7:14. Dana, HR, walked me through award criteria in March. I didn't ask them to take sides. I didn't even tell them what I was doing. I just logged where reality had been witnessed. Then I set traps, polite ones. I emailed HR, CCing myself at my personal address, using the allowed forward to personal rule I'd set for policies. Quick clarification on awards and recognition policy. 6.2. For my records, could you confirm whether discretionary excellence awards, once nominated and reviewed, can be repurposed to other budget lines without written notice to the nominee? Dana replied within an hour, quoting the clause and adding, "Any change requires written notice. Nomination is not a guarantee of funding." Perfect. No drama, just a clean answer. I pinged Finance. For project reporting, can you confirm which cost center-funded executive offsite stays for July 10th, 17th? We're standardizing how we attribute non-project expenses. Priya sent a sanitized summary. 6420, recognition, and 63251 business development, with the manager code. She thanked me for continuing to drive process hygiene. I stared at that phrase too long. I messaged Conrad a question he'd want to answer in writing, following up to confirm next steps on the award you discussed in June. Should I plan for Q3 or Q4 recognition, or is that program suspended? He replied, "Suspended across the board, Evan. Macro headwinds. We'll revisit after Q4. Good. The words across the board in writing. On the public front, I used a little feature most people forget exists. Instagram's download your data. He'd set his account to public, and you don't need to follow someone to archive their content's public URLs. I saved everything relevant from the trip window. Stories expire, memories don't. Then I built the packet. I wrote it like a change order. Calm, factual, quantifiable. Executive summary at the top in 12 bullet points. No adjectives, no accusations, no stolen or lied. Just award nomination received 3. Manager written assurance 6. Award paused without written notice 7. Same week. Travel expenses coded to 6420 recognition. Policy 6.2 requires Director of People Ops. Approval for reallocation. None documented. Requested clarification from HR on 8. Policy quoted. Attachments AH. Every claim had an exhibit tag and a link. I pretended the recipient was a stranger who didn't care about me or Conrad, only about risk. Because that's what this was, ultimately. Not personal drama, but risk. If awards meant to retain performers could be siphoned into luxury travel, what else could be? If a manager could promise compensation to keep a critical employee grinding and then silently reassign it, what did that do to retention, to ethics, to the people who keep the lights on? I wrote a page called Risk to Company and kept it brutally pragmatic. Morale degradation, attrition of key staff, reputational damage if surfaced externally, exposure under our published code of conduct, and potentially under our whistleblower policy if patterns extended beyond this instance. I printed the packet. 2 copies, one for my records, one sealed and handed to Grace with the label, "If I get hit by a bus." She didn't laugh. She slid it into a zip pouch and tucked it behind the cereal boxes, high above the kids' reach. Then she made me a cup of tea and watched the steam rise the way you watch a road for headlights. I drafted the email, not to HR, not to Conrad, to the director. Subject line simple. Documentation. Reallocation of discretionary award to manager travel. Policy 6.2. In the body, I kept my voice dry, almost clinical. Attaching documentation for review. I recognize nominations are not guarantees. My concern is the reallocation of a budget intended for employee recognition to fund a manager's personal travel during the period in which I was told awards were paused across the board. My intent is to protect the company and clarify policy application. I am available for any questions and will continue to perform my duties in good faith. I copied in People Ops, left off Conrad, and attached the packet. I didn't hit send, not yet. Before you swing, you check your footing. I reread the whistleblower policy 3 times. It allowed direct reporting to the director in People Ops without fear of retaliation. It allowed me to submit documentation in good faith. It advised against distributing beyond those channels. Good. I followed it to the letter. On Sunday night, when the house was finally quiet and the pipe under the sink had stopped its reluctant drip, I scheduled the email to send at 7:41 a.m. Monday, 11 minutes before the director's weekly leadership stand-up. It wasn't dramatic, it was efficient. The message would be on the top of her inbox when she sat down. The attachments would be there. The subject line would be readable even on a phone. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark living room, listening to the hum of a refrigerator that had outlived 2 leases. Grace's hand found mine. "You okay?" she whispered. "I'm done being quiet," I said. She squeezed my fingers once. "Good." Upstairs, my daughter had left a new note on her homework. "Ask Dad. In the morning, I'd be there to answer questions about fractions. And if the rest of my day filled with questions that weren't about fractions, who did what, when, and why, I was ready for those too. The folder under my desk, the zip pouch above the cereal, the scheduled send waiting in the dark like a tide about to turn. At 7:41 a.m., my packet left the outbox. By 7:42, the director had it in her inbox. By 8:00, she had opened it. I know because she called me at 8:03. "Evan," she said, her voice clipped but not angry. "I need you in my office. Now, bring your laptop." My stomach knotted, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't an ambush. This was procedure. I grabbed the manila folder from under my desk, slid it into my bag, and walked down the hall. Colleagues glanced up as I passed, their faces curious but careful. Something in my stride must have told them. This wasn't routine. The director's office was cold, precise. Shelves lined with binders, a neat desk, nothing wasted. She gestured to the chair across from her and closed the door. "I reviewed your documentation," she said without preamble. "Is there anything you didn't include that I should know about?" "No," I answered. "Everything's in there. If I didn't have receipts, I didn't write it." She studied me for a long moment. "You realize these are serious allegations?" "They're not allegations," I said evenly. "They're expense reports and policy clauses. You asked me once why I don't speak up more. This is me speaking." She nodded slowly, tapped her pen against the folder, and picked up her phone. "Priya, Dana, my office, now." Within minutes, finance and HR walked in. They both looked tense, like they already suspected what this was about. The director slid copies of my packet across the desk. "Review this," she ordered. "Tell me if anything is inaccurate." Priya's eyes flicked down the pages, her face draining of color. Donna leaned closer, frowning. It took less than 5 minutes before Priya spoke. "These are correct. The manager code matches Conrad's. Recognition budget was reallocated. That shouldn't have happened without my approval." Dana added, "Policy 6.2 is clear. Nominees must be notified in writing. That didn't happen." The director's lips tightened. "Thank you. That's all I needed." She dismissed them with a glance, then turned back to me. "You've done the company a service by documenting this. Effective immediately, you're under my protection. If Conrad retaliates in any way, you come directly to me. Understood?" My throat tightened. I nodded. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes hard now. "Leave this with me. You'll see results." Walking back to my desk, I felt an unfamiliar lightness, like the weight on my chest had shifted. Not gone, but moving. Conrad wasn't untouchable anymore. By noon, the whispers had started. People saw Conrad storm into a meeting room with the director, his face red, his voice raised behind glass walls. A few minutes later, he emerged pale, jaw clenched, avoiding eye contact with anyone. He disappeared for the rest of the day. At 4 p.m., the director sent a company-wide email. Effective immediately, discretionary award allocations will be audited by the People Operations team. All managers are required to disclose any reallocation of recognition funds within the last 6 months. No names, no blame, just policy. But everyone knew what it meant. That night at home, Grace hugged me so tightly, I thought my ribs might crack. "You did it," she whispered. "Not yet," I said, but inside, for the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe maybe she was right. Because the silence that protected Conrad had been broken, and once silence breaks, it never comes back the same. Conrad returned from his second business trip, looking less like a golden god and more like a man who hadn't slept in days. The tan was still there, but it clashed with the storm on his face. By then, the walls were closing in. The director had moved quietly but decisively. Audit logs were pulled. Expense reports were cross-checked. HR compiled a list of every award nomination from the past 12 months. Finance combed through transactions with surgical precision. Each discovery was another brick in the wall Conrad had built around himself. Except now the bricks were closing in, not keeping others out. I didn't see most of it firsthand, but the office has a way of leaking stories. Priya from finance, who usually kept her lips sealed, dropped a single line over coffee. He coded a yacht rental as client development. Dana from HR, who looked perpetually exhausted, muttered, "Policy violations don't just disappear, Evan. They pile up." The whisper spread like wildfire. Colleagues avoided Conrad's eye, some out of fear, others because they couldn't stop smirking. For years he'd strutted through the halls untouchable. Now he was radioactive. The real spectacle came on a Thursday morning. I was at my desk when an all-hands meeting invite hit every inbox, marked mandatory. 30 minutes later, the entire department was crammed into the big conference hall, the one we usually use for product launches. Conrad stood at the front, flanked by the director and a grim-looking HR manager. His suit was pressed, but his hands fidgeted, betraying the cracks. The director stepped up first. "Transparency," she said avidly, "is non-negotiable in this company. We hold ourselves accountable, especially in matters of recognition and reward." She didn't look at Conrad, but the weight of her words landed squarely on him. Then Conrad spoke. His voice, usually booming with false confidence, was thin now, wavering. "There have been misunderstandings in budget allocations. I regret any confusion. Moving forward will ensure tighter controls." He was cut off by the director's raised hand. "This is not a misunderstanding. This is a violation of policy. Effective immediately, Mr. Conrad has been removed from his managerial duties, pending further review. Interim leadership will be announced shortly." The room went silent. You could hear the air conditioning hum. Then, like a ripple, the silence broke. First a cough, then a whispered, "Wow," then the shuffle of people shifting in their seats. Conrad's face drained of color. He tried to speak again, but HR stepped forward. "That will be all." The words landed like a gavel. I sat there, my heart pounding, watching the man who had stolen from me, who had humiliated me, robbed my family's security, and flaunted it in our faces, reduced to silence. For the first time in my career, Conrad had no words that could save him. After the meeting, people swarmed me quietly. Pats on the back, murmured congratulations, subtle nods of respect. Nobody said out loud what they all suspected, that I had been the one to trigger this, but their eyes said it. Later that afternoon, an email arrived in my inbox. "Evan, after reviewing your nomination and the circumstances surrounding the discretionary award, we are reinstating your bonus in full. Funds will be wired this week. Additionally, we would like to discuss your future here. You've demonstrated integrity and leadership under pressure, qualities we value highly. I read it twice, then a third time. The numbers blurred in front of me. When I called Grace to tell her, she didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then I heard her cry softly into the phone. That night, we sat at the kitchen table again. The same pile of bills was there, but this time I slid the letter across to her. "It's real?" I whispered. She looked at me with tired eyes that finally softened. "We can fix the roof," she said. "We can breathe." I nodded, but what mattered most wasn't the money. It was the silence. Not the crushing silence I'd endured for months, but a new kind. The silence of peace, of knowing justice had started to land. And Conrad? Word was he'd been stripped of his access. His calendar cleared, his projects reassigned. For a man who lived off attention and power, this was worse than any fine or demotion. It was exile. But I had a feeling his fall wasn't over yet. The transfer hit my account on a Friday morning. I stared at the number for a long time, the way you stare at a scar you've carried so long you can't remember your skin without it. $50,000. After months of humiliation, gaslighting, and silence, it was finally there. Real. Ours. I forwarded the confirmation email to Grace with a single line. "We're okay now." She called me seconds later, voice trembling with relief. "Roof first," she said, laughing through tears. "Then maybe, just maybe, a vacation where you don't bring your laptop." But the bonus was only part of it. That same afternoon, the director called me into her office. She didn't waste time. "You've shown something rare, Evan," she said. "Not just competence, but courage. We want you to step into a leadership role. Interim at first, but permanent if it works out. We need people like you. Steady, ethical, resilient." For the first time, I felt like someone was seeing me not as a workhorse, not as a safety net, but as a leader. I accepted quietly the way I always do. But inside, a fire lit that hadn't burned in years. Conrad, meanwhile, was unraveling. The investigation didn't stop at my case. Once the auditors opened the books, more misallocations came to light. Trips disguised as conferences. Dinners labeled as strategy sessions that matched luxury restaurant receipts. Even personal purchases slipped into client development. What started as whispers turned into headlines in the company Slack channels. How deep does it go? Within 2 weeks, Conrad was out. Officially, the email said he had decided to pursue other opportunities. Everyone knew the truth. His badge was deactivated, his office cleared overnight. The man who once strutted through the halls now avoided the building entirely. I heard from a colleague in finance that he'd lawyered up, trying to fight repayment of funds. The company's legal team was ready. It didn't matter if he clawed at the walls. The fall had already broken him. One night, Grace showed me his Instagram. The glossy posts had stopped. The champagne buckets and poolside captions were gone. His last update was a blurry shot of a downtown skyline with the words, "On to the next chapter." No likes, no comments. Silence. It struck me then, for a man who lived on attention, silence was the cruelest punishment. My life didn't transform overnight. The bills didn't vanish. The roof still needed fixing. But we could breathe again. I was present at dinner. I made it to my daughter's recital and clapped until my hands stung. I helped my son with his science project, staying up late not because I had to rescue a failing client, but because I wanted to see his eyes light up when the baking soda volcano erupted. For the first time in years, my work and my life felt balanced. Not easy, but balanced. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Conrad, about the way he smirked when he told me macro headwinds, about the salt stain on his shirt, the champagne bottle in his stories, the way he believed nobody could touch him. And then I think about the packet I built, the quiet way the truth took shape, the silence I broke. Justice doesn't always come in explosions. Sometimes it comes in audits, in signatures, in quiet consequences that pile up until even the loudest man can't shout his way out. My boss stole my $50,000 bonus and spent it on a vacation. But in the end, he lost something far bigger: his career, his reputation, his power. And me? I got my bonus. I got recognition. I got my family's peace back. Most of all, I got proof that even in a world where liars win too often, sometimes, just sometimes, karma keeps the receipts.